Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where in the world you are. I'm here in the United States, which in the Americas, it's still somewhat early in the morning. And I want to welcome you to the second Next System Convergence. My name is Ben Manski. I am a professor of sociology at George Mason University, which is a public university in the Commonwealth of Virginia in the United States. And I direct Next System Studies here at GMU. And I am very pleased to be gathering here today with all of you as we come together to hold a forum on the Next System. This is actually the second Next System Convergence that has taken place. We had one earlier this year, less than 6 months ago in April, and we are holding this second Next System Convergence on the way to the first major wave of Next System Teach-Ins, which are taking place this November. So I want to give you a sense of who is gathered here. There are people who are gathering for this convergence from pretty much every continent. Maybe we'll have some researchers in Antarctica, but certainly across the world, there have been people who have been part of this process, who are presenting, coming together today. It is the case that this effort has a lot of its roots in the United States, but we have very actively worked to build relationships with networks of scholars and activists and community leaders around the world. And we see this project as being a project that is necessarily transnational because there's so much we have to learn from each other. And there's so much that we can gain from building solidarity and again, common understanding. I want to give you a sense of what I will be addressing now, as opposed to tomorrow morning when we have the organizing conference for the Next System Teach-Ins. I will be taking a little bit of time to give you a sense of the role of this convergence and what to expect from the Next System Convergence and how to participate in it. So it's sort of nuts and bolts for all of you. I'll be talking a little bit about the Next System Teach-Ins, just a reminder about when they're happening, what they are, what traditions they draw on, and what makes a teach-in different. And again, I'll be talking in more depth about some of this, and all of us will be talking in more depth about the teach-ins tomorrow. And I'll address the question of the next system. What do we mean by the next system? And that's actually the reason why we have this session right now. It's not just a welcome and orientation. It's an opportunity to address that question because a number of people had suggested that we should take that question on at the very beginning. So I hope that's good. And that's what you're coming to expect. So I'll start off. Oh, and I'll also say if we have time, I'll open it up for Q&A and some questions too. So first, let's start with this convergence and the role of the convergence. The convergence is a way for us to bring people together on very short notice from around the world to build relationships, to network, and to, above all, prepare for the Next System Teach-Ins in November. The convergences so far have been taking place entirely online. The teach-ins are in place. They take place in particular campuses and particular communities. And the teach-ins have a very different kind of function than the convergence does. So this is an important step on the way to organizing teach-ins this November and also future rounds of teach-ins. This is a field building and a movement building process. In terms of what to expect today and tomorrow and how to participate, you're here because you've been getting emails, you've been on the website, so you're aware that there are a whole series of different sessions that are taking place today for the Forum on the Next System. These sessions are organized by different sets of people and organizations and networks. People have stepped forward all over the world to offer what they have to offer and to raise questions and to facilitate discussions on key questions around next system design and alternatives, around system change, around the systemic crises of these times, around what it takes to build movements for system change and what these movements know. And really want to thank all of you for who have been contributing that. So what it means for those who are coming here as participants, and this is their first time or maybe first time in a while interacting with Next System work, it just means that you have a kind of smorgasbord, a series of different options. It's like a potluck. People are bringing what they have to share. And it's not that kind of coherent. It's actually quite a coherent program, but it's not a program that was designed by us as organizers on the Next System Teach-Ins Taskforce. I think the coherence is really promising. There's a lot of crossover and synergy and connections that I think is pretty obvious if you look at the program. But I think that is emerging from the work that people are doing. So that's what's to expect. That's what you have to expect. You just go to the website, nextsystem.org, click on Convergence. You can see the program. Click on the link that is associated with the session that you want to go to, and you're in. Tomorrow, we're having an organizing conference that is much more focused on how to organize a teach-in, what the teach-ins are about. There'll be a lot of crosstalk and conversations. We're looking forward to that too. Second, I want to address the Next System teach-ins. So first of all, when are they happening? So for this wave of teach-ins, they're happening between November 1st and the 16th. Now, of course, somebody could organize a Next System teach-in at another time, and there may be some momentum for people to organize teach-ins after November. But of course, there is a kind of power to doing things together. There's a sense of solidarity, of sort of collective joy that comes from doing something together. And so that is what we have decided to do, is to organize these teach-ins for any time between the November 1st and 16th dates. And the teach-ins are happenings. They are a collection of events that take place on a university or college or a school campus, or in a community center, a union hall, a religious center, a public space in the community, or sometimes both. But they are events that happen in place. And a teach-in is not a single panel or a single conversation. A teach-in is not a conference. It's not just another sort of sexier name for something else that we're probably more familiar with. The teach-ins are a collection of events that do exactly what the word says. They teach in. In other words, they bring popular education, and they bring sort of collective knowledge into a community, and they bring the knowledge that's in the community, whether it's a university or a broader community, together to learn from each other and to learn what we know together, and to help that community, whether it's a campus community or a different kind of community, to take responsibility for a particular question. And so the word teach-in has a particular origin. It has its origins in the movement in the United States for U.S. withdrawal from Vietnam in the 1960s. And the first major teach-ins that went by that name, there's all kinds of popular education and participatory forms of education go on all around the world. But the first events that were called teach-ins came out of the moratorium on the war in Vietnam. So the mass movement that was building and that the teach-ins were part of building in the 1960s in the U.S. to make the question of the U.S. invasion of Vietnam and the support for the dictatorship in the South and the escalation of U.S. military deployments to Vietnam, and then what the U.S. military in the United States were doing in Vietnam and to the people of Vietnam, and also to the people of the United States and to surrounding countries in Southeast Asia. All those questions were brought home. They were brought home to college campuses, in that case, in the 1960s, in a series of waves of teach-ins that took place. And what it meant for the movement against the war in Vietnam in the United States was a deepening and a broadening of that movement, because suddenly, if you were at a college campus at that time, and I wasn't alive back then, but many of my mentors were people who organized those teach-ins, what it meant was that you were confronted with the question of your relationship to the war in Vietnam. You were confronted with the question of the relationship of your institution and your community to the U.S. war on the people of Vietnam. And that was transformative. That was a transformative process. And so that was the first major wave of teach-ins. And they took place on various college campuses, sometimes during the same week, sometimes in a series of teach-ins over the course of the first spring of teach-ins. I've written about this. There's an article about the history of teach-ins that you can find at nextsystem.org. There were another succeeding series of waves of teach-ins in the United States that were quite important. Probably the most famous of these was the teach-in that is now known as Earth Day. Earth Day in 1970 was initially conceived of as a wave of teach-ins that were drawing on the tradition that had been built up with the anti-war movement in the 1960s. And the first Earth Day was white, profound. It involved millions, if not tens of millions of people in 1970. And it's an important lesson that wave of teach-ins that included all forms of action and education, panels and discussions in small settings and large ones, demonstrations, festivals, that wave of teach-ins on the environment produced a number of things. First of all, second wave environmental movement. The second wave environmental movement in the United States, which was incredibly powerful in the 1970s and produced one of the strongest environmental regulatory regimes in the world, a regime that actually has survived numerous attacks on it and has come back. That came out of those teach-ins. And the other thing it produced was environmental studies. Environmental studies has its origins in the Earth Day teach-ins. You had, with second wave feminism, the use of teach-ins on a large scale, and also other forms of education. Remember, teach-ins, we're not advocating for teach-ins as something that's exclusive. It's not the only thing that we should be doing, but they perform a particular role. In the movement to support the struggle against apartheid in South Africa, teach-ins were incredibly important in the late 1970s and the early 1980s, building the mass movement in the United States and in other countries as the teach-in form was adopted elsewhere and that name was adopted in other countries to building solidarity with the struggle, the freedom struggle in South Africa. In the 1990s, there were a series of teach-ins that went under the name democracy teach-ins that centered the question of the corporatization of education. And those were teach-ins that I was involved with as somebody in my early 20s and mid 20s. I was a coordinator for those teach-ins. Those took place on hundreds of college campuses across North America. They produced the student anti-sweatshop movement. They made a major difference in terms of developing the analysis of the corporatization of higher education in the United States and in Canada, Puerto Rico, and Mexico. And also they produced very large numbers of people who became involved in the movement that made the Seattle uprising in 1999 happen. So I could say a lot more about the history of teach-ins, but I think you get the sense that a teach-in is not just another name for another kind of event. We'll be talking about this more tomorrow. Third, the next system. What do we mean by next system? Well, I mean, it depends on your frame of reference. When the Next System project was launched 10 years ago, there was a sort of clear focus on the United States. And the Next System project came out of a wave of protests, out of the Wisconsin uprising in my home state, out of Occupy Wall Street, out of the response to Katrina, out of the beginnings of Black Lives Matter under that name. And it was a time of great upsurge. And so the idea with the Next System project was to put, quote, the next system question for the United States on the table. But I think that we're in a period where addressing things within the bounds of a nation state, we learned that lesson in the 1990s in the US, and I think other people were already reminded of it daily around the world far before that. And so what I mean by the next system is I'm talking about the next world system, the next world political, economic, legal, you name it, ecological system. We live on one planet. It is a biosphere. We need to keep it that way. And so that's what I mean by the next system, the idea that we have a world system. It's incredibly complex. It's contested. But there is a dominant logic to the political economic system that has come to dominate almost the entire world. And so if we're talking about a next system, we're talking about some kind of system that would replace that system. Many people involved with next system work use the plural. They'll say next systems, and we'll see that in our next session. You'll encounter that. There are probably some obvious reasons why a lot of people use the plural. That we don't all inhabit the same lives. We have, all of us, radically different positionalities and understandings and experiences and perspectives and histories that we come from. And so not only is the world system made up of many different kinds of subsystems, and a lot of those systems are contesting the world system. If that weren't the case, we would be in deep trouble. But the reality is that we do inhabit different worlds, and I would say the converse is also true. We inhabit different worlds, but we also do share this planet. So there's a kind of tension between the use of Next System and Next Systems as frames. I think that's a very healthy tension. And for myself, I'll just say, so long as we keep in mind that the point is not just to change this system or that system, but to produce a Next System that is for the planet collectively, that is dynamic, that's always changing, but is one that we can live with. That, in the words that are on the website, that is democratic, sustainable, and just. Then I think we're in good shape. So there's a lot of richness there. I'll just end with this. The function of this gathering, as I said earlier, is to both build the field and to build the movement at the same time. So the field is Next System Studies, and Next System Studies is a field that we are working to build here in higher education in many different places around the world. There has not been a founding meeting for Next System Studies. That won't be taking place for a little while yet. What we are doing is we are making connections. We are building relationships. We are building trust. We are learning from each other. And we are working to strategize and learn how to move together so that an inherently transdisciplinary field of study that involves people not only from the humanities and social sciences and law, but also from the physical sciences can emerge, that can mobilize universities and colleges and schools more effectively to assist society, to assist the larger society in moving to a better Next System and to avert the alternative Next System that we are facing. There are multiple designs for a Next System that are afoot in the world. So that is one of the purposes of this. I'll talk about this more tomorrow, but because we have a Next System Studies program at George Mason University, we have had to work to develop curriculum courses. We have had fellowships. We have 5 years of experience now with this. And we have a particular approach to Next System Studies that involves 4 domains of Next System work. And we'll talk about that more. Looking at my time. But this isn't just about field building. It's also essentially about movement building. And similarly, this process, the Convergence, the Next System Teach-Ins, are about building networks, connections, relationships, trust, and learning from each other, strategizing and moving together. And so there's all kinds of Next System work that is taking place in many institutions and communities and through via various networks and under many names around the world. And there is the question of the role of the academy and of schools in this larger movement for a better Next System. So again, I'll be talking about this in much greater depth tomorrow with Leslie Wood and Sarin Mudliar. What I would just ask for everybody here to do today is to please spread the word. Things are moving very quickly in our world right now, and so I found lately that people will shift gears and make new plans on a moment's notice because we have that kind of urgency at this moment. So let people know who may not know about the forum that's taking place today. Let them know about particular sessions that you think would be of interest to them, leading up to the last session that's scheduled, which is on Chicago, DC, and Los Angeles, and nonviolent civil resistance and system change. So many good sessions, but I'm especially feeling the urgency, being somebody who lives in the DC area at the moment around that. I want to thank you all for coming. I want to thank all the participants and presenters. I want to thank our partners in building this process, many organizations, both within academia and within various communities and in different parts of the world who have formally come on board. If you're new to this process, this is an invitation to join with us. This is a multi-year process. And I think I may have just a few minutes for questions. And I don't see any questions here. That's good. I hadn't invited them yet. But if you have any questions, you could pose them now using the Q&A feature. Let me just do that. See if anybody has any questions here. So going to go into the chat and open that up to everybody here. So your chat function should now work too. While I'm waiting to see, maybe that was so crystal clear and obvious that everybody's ready to go. We have sessions. I believe we have 2 sessions that are going to be taking place in under 10 minutes. And I do want to thank people who are helping out. Many hands make light work. So there are 60 people who have worked on this convergence. I have a question here from Ken Kobayashi, and I'm sorry for identifying you. I should have asked that, but I'll try to make that a practice in the future. But the question is, will recordings be available of sessions that we can't attend? And the answer is yes. That is part of the reason why we're using this webinar format. It's not as interactive as other Zoom formats. In the future, we'd like to be able to have tools online for all kinds of different sessions at online gatherings. But this produces better video. So that's part of the idea. Any other questions? What are the 4 domains? I had this question of the Next System curriculum. Okay, so I will speak to that briefly. So for me, Next System Studies involves the study of the relationship between systemic crises, which I define as crises of a system which, if left unaddressed, will result in the collapse of that system. So outside of intervention, the system will collapse. It's an objective question. So that is what I mean by systemic crises. So question of systemic crises, the relationship of those to systemic movements, which is to say social movements that have advanced to the point in which they have an agenda for system change. They are not focused merely on particular issues. They are articulating an alternative system, whether that's an alternative system of law or an alternative economic system or something that's more integrated, an alternative society. But they are advocating and working towards system change. So that's a systemic movement. So what is the relationship between systemic movements and systemic crises? System design, which is to say the design of the system as it is. What is it about the design of the system, for instance, that produces crises? What is it about alternative design that may allow us to create the kinds of outcomes that we actually want? So what next system designs produce the type of society, the type of lives that we would actually want, type of relationship with the earth that we would actually want? So questions of system design. And then there are questions in the domain of system change, because of course, movements make history, but not always under conditions of their own choosing. So there are different pathways to system change that we as people who are concerned with the question of system change know about, whether for scholars in academia or intellectuals, organic intellectuals, other kinds of intellectuals and communities. We're thinking about this. Revolutions, social transformation, and reconstruction are 3 broad kinds of paths through which we know that social systems have changed. And so those are the 4 domains that I have built into the way in which I teach about next system questions: systemic crises, systemic movements, system design, system change. And I found it quite useful in getting at all kinds of questions. So that's a beginning there. I have an article that has been accepted pending revisions with the Journal of Global Social Challenges, and we will push that out to everybody along with other things, many other resources. So I have a question here as well from Greg about, have you reached out to social psychologists to help the challenge of current dominant narrative of what's happening and that it's too difficult to fundamentally change? That's a great question, Greg, because in fact, Next System Studies at George Mason University has just formed a partnership with the Albert Einstein Institution to do just that. So social psychology had its heyday a long time ago, but in terms of the study of social movements, but is incredibly important to taking on exactly the question that you raised. And this also just highlights just how much work there is to be done. Working with people in engineering, computer science, we've had physicists approach us who want to work with us in Next System Studies, social psychology, law, history, fine arts, popular arts. There's so much work that can be done and that is being done, but it can be brought together here. And then, there's a question about how many people are watching right now. It's early, but what I'll say is that we had over 400 people who registered just in the last week, and I'm sure there'll be many more coming in. What we'll do is, I think there are maybe 40 of us at this moment, but again, this is very early in the US, including for some people who are here, and I just violated a rule of mine, which is not to share numbers. But what I'll say is that we will send out a summary. We will have a good account of participation. At the first Next System Convergence, we had 98 unique participants. They were from 31 universities. They were from every continent. It was a great sweep, and I'm really looking forward to joining the rest of you here today. I think I'd better wrap it up at this point. So we're going to stop recording. Thanks, everybody, for joining us.